Welcome to the Quantum Healthy podcast. I'm Andeea, a licensed addiction counselor, and along with my co-host, Laura Kissmann, a quantum nutritionist, we will be inviting expert scientists, clinicians, survivors, and thrivers to distill their pearls of wisdom attained from applying quantum biology to their fields of research and everyday lives. Our goal is to bring you easy to understand principles and practices about the study of light, water, and magnetism so you can take your health into your own hands. This episode is sponsored by VIVARAYS, the only eyewear company that truly understands your biology. VIVARAYS are advanced blue light glasses designed with circadian biology in mind. Unlike typical blue blockers, they filter light in harmony with your body's natural rhythms, helping you sleep deeper, feel more energized, and protect your long-term health. We love companies that support biology-backed wellness, and VIVARAYS is leading the way. Use code QUANTUMHEALTHY at VIVARAYS.com to save 15% and support your sleep, focus, and natural energy the way nature intended. Enjoy this episode. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Quantum Healthy podcast. We have a very special guest today, Sara Pugh. Thank you, Sara, for joining us.
Hello.
All right. So we all know each other from the Quantum Biology Collective, so that's how Laura and I know you. But I want to just give a little introduction. So you have a degree in Biochemistry Genetics and a PhD in Molecular Mechanisms, and you studied protein folding, which plays a role in Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease, antioxidants, and fluorescence. And you worked as a postdoctoral researcher, so you have a lot of your work has been published in various peer-reviewed journals. And you have a very successful membership group and podcast called Quantum Based and a YouTube channel called Busy Superhuman. And you are indeed a busy superhuman. So thank you so much for being here today. Why don't you tell us a little bit about just how you found quantum biology?
Okay, yeah, so with my PhD, I did do optics and use microscopy, and protein folding involves light and tryptophans and shining UV light at proteins. Then my postdoc was on statins and cholesterol, so I did a lot more microscopy and imaging and worked on live cells and all sorts of other things. And then I left science because I wanted to be a Pilates teacher because I had like backache and I'd fed up of science. So that's how I got into things like Reiki and hypnosis and movement and fascia and Bowen technique and functional neurology. And then while I was doing that, I still kept up with biochemistry because everything you learn that's not out of university is all of the interesting, important stuff. And it's also, you can put it into real life practice. I then got into ketogenic diets and fasting, and there's a huge amount of biophysics behind ketogenic diets because it heavily revolves around the mitochondria. But then when I did my degree, we were kind of misinformed about what the mitochondria actually is. And we have a famous textbook called Straya that's full of nonsense, which will tell you all sorts of things that are completely wrong about ketones and fuel and Gibbs free energy and entropy and photons and everything like that. So that was very interesting, the medical ketogenic diets and then the fasting. And then I found Dave Asprey, a very long time ago, as soon as he'd kind of started his bulletproof radio. And that's when I first learned about blue blockers and red light panels and exclusion zone water, because protein folding is actually the hydrophobic effect of amino acids wanting to bury them, hide from water. So biochemists do know about water, but we don't really understand, because we don't understand that water is completely different when it gets light shone on it. It's completely different when it's interacting with non-native EMFs or any other kind of radiation. And the water the mitochondria make is completely different to what we have in the lab, and as is the water that lines all of our membranes. So I did have some knowledge about water, and also fascia and people in the Bowen field. They're the ones who've read, books by Dr. Batmangeli. I think it's the very famous Your Body's Cry for Water. And then I obviously started to incorporate quantum biology into things with clients. And then it's like there's one rabbit hole after another with quantum biology, because I think it's quite easy to understand about how to do it if you explain to people. But then quantum biology then extends into things like plasma, scalar fields, something called quantum light, quantum entanglement, longitudinal waves, action at a distance, then sort of bioelectronics. That's also a very important part of quantum biology. And I did actually do quite a lot of electronics. I can't say that I'm any good at it, but when you start to think about a mitochondria being like a capacitor and then electrons tunneling down the electron transport chain, in simple terms, we can start to talk about things like electric currents in the body. And this also helps to explain to people something called redox, because a lot of people have heard redox before you detox, and they don't really understand that it's sort of referring to their overall sort of charge, and you can call it how much potential difference is there in your cells and membranes, and it has to be like at a minus millivolts, or you can say in simple terms about how much electrons you've got in relation to protons, or you can talk to people in a language that, okay, you need to have charge and electricity. Here's a big list of things that steal your charge. And obviously, deuterium's one, alcohol's another, being inside all the time, stuff like that. So I think I got into it as a biochemist, understanding sort of optics and sort of water physics about water bond angles and hydrogen bonding and van der Waals, but it was completely detracted from daily life. So I think now I have to go back and like relearn a lot of physics, or find ways to explain physics to people, because the important thing about quantum biology is, as much as I found biochemistry interesting for about 10 years, it's a kind of old-fashioned way of looking at the body. And we have to sort of move into more sort of biophysical ways of explaining even just something like mass being sort of charge that's gained inertia, or slowed down light, or frozen light, as David Bohm would say, or ether condensates. And we have to move into more of an idea of an electromagnetic world, because sort of fundamentally we are just made of waves. So it's something that there's a lot to do with quantum biology that I like, that people know already. They just don't know why. And when you give them an explanation of the physics of grounding, or the biophysics of telepathy, or manifesting, or biofields, they kind of knew anyway, but it kind of validates people. Oh yeah, I was right after all. I'll just keep on doing all of my stuff that made me feel good. So that's sort of briefly where I'm at. How did I get here, and what am I doing?
Yeah, well, thank you for validating our woo, right?
Oh no, when it comes to woo, like nobody can beat me at woo. I just am a closet woo. But also I think in terms of woo, as I mentioned about functional neurology, a lot of people are very left-brained and they try and intellectualize everything. And the way the left brain works is not the same as the right. It's very much like it likes the text, not the context, and it kind of can be very repetitive. And people sort of talk a lot about having OCD like behavior now. And then the right brain is much more about the context. So there's both right brain and left brain activities available in quantum biology, because you can be a huge nerd and really feed your left brain with all of these facts and the mental masturbation. But then to actually do quantum biology, it becomes a very right brain activity. So again, a lot of the woo stuff would be more sort of towards a right brain person. So it'll do them good to do a little bit of left brain activity and vice versa. And it's something really simple about left and right brain. Even Dr. Melillo's book, Disconnected Kids, that's like a really simple, easy way for people. Oh, that's interesting what you just said. Can I read more about what you're talking about left and right hemispheres, and how do I stimulate one or the other? And I think that's sort of important as well in sort of quantum health, because it sort of embraces senses, colors, sounds. Sort of different color light is very important for how the different colors interact with our body. So yeah, I don't think the thing is with woo, a lot of people I work with, that's why they've got a problem, because they don't really understand. They just think they're going to turn into compost when they die, and they don't have any concept or idea of consciousnesses greater than our own, or the collective, or bliss states. And I think I think the days of woo being laughed at is going to come to an end very soon, because there's so much physics now that can actually prove and give kind of plausible physics and repeatable data for even things like bilocation of a whole human. Because sure, at quantum level, there's quantum superposition where things can be in two places at once. And deuterium's an example of a molecule under strain that's sort of trying to be in two places or two forms at once. But when you get into the physics of it, it actually de-wooifies things. And sometimes I think, well, the way I deal with life now and EMFs and stress and everything is just my woo. But and also we shape our own reality anyway with our minds. So if I want to make up woo and a reality and then live in it, and I'm really happy like that, then good for me. And I love my crystals, as people know about my Vogel crystals, and I've now moved into fire crystals because a crystal, the physics of crystals is really amazing about the piezoelectrics and the way in which quartz works. And obviously, crystals are really important in technology, but then liquid crystalline water and crystals behavior in our bodies is sort of a fundamental way of how water communicates. And I think a crystal is sort of like an interface between the water in living things and then say my crystal. And so it's like a very important interface, but humans have adored crystals forever. So I think, you know, again, I don't think they're woo at all, especially with all of the interesting things like the ability to imbue ultraviolet light into water, like Slim Sperling's tensor rings. And he actually collaborated with, I think it was Hans Becker and another a proper scientist to look at this phenomena. So this idea of UV light not just only being in our own bodies and being crucial for our health, but UV light coming from the sun, which is sort of vital for health. And then this idea that things like crystals and tensor rings and such like can create a resonance and a frequency or UV emission in water. So it's all about sort of gradually over time joining up the dots, because I'm much more into finding woo or a theory and then applying a quantum principle to it to see actually, can I explain in a language that if a physicist decided they wanted to talk to me about my water vortexer or why am I seeing the sunrise, I'd be able to explain it to them in their language.
Yeah. And that is key, right? That we're able to explain things so people know what to do, because a lot of times the science goes over their head or yeah. So and that's exactly what we want to do on this podcast. In fact, so speaking of rabbit holes that you had mentioned, today we think we need to go down the deuterium rabbit hole. Deuterium has been brought up on this podcast in the past and just very briefly defined. But yeah, I would just love to start with why should people care about deuterium, and then we'll get into what it is maybe.
Yeah, but so first of all, with deuterium, it's an isotope of hydrogen and it's twice the mass because it's got a neutron in its nucleus as well as a proton. So it's naturally occurring and it's not radioactive like a carbon-14 isotope, and it's not very abundant either. It's like one deuterium for every 660,000 hydrogen. So when it comes to hydrogen, it's like the universal energy molecule on the planet. So you can imagine if deuterium is a sort of hydrogen, it kind of matters. And then if we think about how the matter in our body is built up, we can, even though it's just made of waves, like hydrogen, of course, is just a nest of waves. So we're made of carbon, nitrogen, hydrogen. So there's going to be lots of hydrogen in our bodies, and it's sort of in bonds and molecular hydrogen, things like that, and also protons in the mitochondria and things like that. So there's obviously going to be deuterium there as well. So there is a natural sort of ratio that just happens, and anything that's natural, that means usually the organism is going to function as it should, because with deuterium from a biological perspective, Dr. Gabor Chomely, I think, published a paper about 25 years ago about the role of deuterium, and it plays an important role in growth. So it is important for things to grow. That's why seeds and beans and plants, babies have got so much deuterium in them, and also why small creatures like microorganisms, bacteria, things like fungi, all of those, they all like deuterium as well. Like parasites would be small, that they'll eat the deuterium because they have a very short growth cycle. So it is important for growth, but then what happens, there is an important switch inside the body that Dr. Gabor Chomely also has papers on, and he's presented it for me on my podcast, to say that the deuterium to hydrogen ratio acts like a switch. And when there's too much deuterium in relation to hydrogen, cells don't die when they're supposed to and they keep growing. So obviously that's dreadful because that's sort of a huge hallmark for cancer. And Dr. Gabor Chomely discovered this pathway because he added deuterium depleted water to sort of cancerous or precancerous cells to show that when you bring the deuterium down and the hydrogen or the protein back up again, this growth pathway is switched off. So that's one reason why deuterium is a problem when there's too much. The other thing that's important about deuterium is that when you form bonds, a carbon deuterium bond is much harder to break than a carbon hydrogen bond. So if we think of our body as like, for the moment, the chemical reactions that go on, not the light or the water or anything, in order for it to be efficient, you want the bonds to be able to be broken quickly so that you can build and move different molecules around. So it's like, say with a deuterium, if the body wanted to move a hydrogen about and put it somewhere else or build something, if it can just pull the hydrogen off, then quickly it can put whatever else it wants on. Like the deuterium, it might need to go away and look for a hammer and try and smash the deuterium bond off. So it basically just slows things down and it can get in the way. Of course, in the right amount, it can regulate the speed in which enzymes and molecules work, and this would be something called the kinetic isotope effect. So when everything's in balance, like at the Goldilocks amount of deuterium, then everything works happily as it should. The other thing that's interesting about deuterium is when it's put into connective tissue like tendons or ligaments, it can add tensile strength. So it's allowed to go in there. And I think sometimes with certain situations like Ehlers-Danlos and maybe even lipedema, when people have got very lax ligaments and then have things like metabolic problems or obesity or type 2 diabetes, leptin resistance, in conjunction with loose ligaments, I think my theory is that the deuterium is not going into the connective tissue for whatever reason. Maybe it's glyphosate, maybe there are other reasons, maybe it's circadian rhythms, maybe it's lots of things, and then it's not where it's supposed to be. So these people now have not enough deuterium in the connective tissue like the collagen and things like that, and now there's too much of it where there shouldn't be. So the other terrible place where you can end up with deuterium where it's not allowed is in the mitochondria, because I think it was Professor Olgan who first showed that, or he modeled it by molecular dynamics simulation first, that if you try and stuff a deuterium down the ATPase, which is a rotating nanomotor in the mitochondria that makes ATP, it's going to make the motor stall, and it creates, first of all, chaos or interruption to a biological process, but also over time, this deuterium can cause the mitochondria to give off a lot of inflammation signals, like it'll give off free radicals or light, and as a warning, because an unhappy mitochondria actually gives off more light. And if you're upsetting it by disturbing its motor, it's going to send off alarm signals. So eventually the mitochondria will die. It will have set off sort of alarm signals in the vicinity, which can also communicate with the DNA. And over time, if the mitochondria dies, the cell will die, and then whatever that cell population is, like say an organ, it's going to impact the health of that organ. And I think that you can do scans like MRI scans, because they're just basically probing the effect of water, and we do actually use deuterium heavy water for doing NMR. That's in a lab, but you can actually sort of detect deuterium in excess in certain tissues with particular kinds of scans, and it does correlate with which organ that person has a problem with. So we can see that there's sort of adverse health issues related to too much deuterium. Then from a more biophysical perspective, deuterium's got a lower dielectric constant than water, and that just means it's not as good at holding and distributing electrical charge or flux. So in that language, what it means is it's going to interrupt how efficient and how full the water battery in the body can get, because the deuterium is not so good at holding the charge, nor is it as good as charge distribution, because that's another key thing why I mentioned the body as being bioelectronic, that you have to have the energy and the information and the charge, but it's got to be distributed or sent to where it's needed. So if there's something in the way of of our water highway, as in too much deuterium, it's just going to disturb this process and make it less efficient. So that's another reason why deuterium's linked to aging and things like that. And then another thing that happens now that we've got a situation where, say, the person's got deuterium in their mitochondria and it's annoying them and they're emitting too much light because they're distressed. It's like a sick state of a person. People emit more biophotons when they're not well, so they're leaking light. Then you've got the deuterium in the water battery, basically disturbing how your water battery is able to hold charge and how the flow works in the body. So again, that's going to count as a sort of energy crisis. So we can see how, or begin to see how, maybe leptin could be part of this as well, because that's sort of our electromagnetic energy accountant. And I can't say I know exactly and fully how leptin works down to every different kind of energy system in the body, including magnetism. But in simple language, if you're leaking charge, whether it's light or your water batteries not as full as it could be, you are full of chaos, and the signals in your body is loads of noise and not the little tiny signals getting through efficiently. That's going to be a waste of energy, or you're sort of not being energy efficient. So there's many reasons of why anything that's an energy waste in the body or tends us towards entropy and away from neg entropy is going to create a energy crisis in the body. And obviously this is first of all threatening, because it's like, when you're somewhere really important and you've got like 2% left on your phone, and you think, oh no, if my phone goes out of battery here, I'm just so, how am I going to get home? And, all of this. Or so that's how leptin feels when it senses a sort of energy deficit in the body. So it's a threat thing, because also with leptin and deuterium, they do play a role in fertility as well, and hormones relating to having a baby. Because if we don't have enough energy on board as a woman, the body's like, oh no, I don't think making a baby is a good idea at all. This is a very bad idea. So that's another reason why leptin ties into something really important, which is procreation. So in some ways, deuterium also will as well, because it's going to interfere with sex hormones, but also it's going to steal energy and be a factor that it encourages leptin missignaling or leptin resistance, which then is a threat to the ability of a woman to make a baby. So there's lots of people that talk about deuterium in sort of esoteric ways about life and death and light, but like anything, it does make sense. And then speaking of light, there's another thing which, because we don't have the technology like to measure these biophotons properly inside the body, that under certain conditions and magnetic fields and pressure, deuterium could emit light. And like I said before, with light in the body, yeah, we love light, but it has to be controlled the right amount at the right time. And when it's things like biophotons or light in a biological sense, it has to be very quantized or very controlled, not just a big splurge, because, light's great, but it's the same as like your phone. If you try to run your phone off the mains, that's like loads of electricity. It would just like blow it up. It's very, very intricate, like circuitry of one, like things like transistors and and diodes and everything, and a lot of that in the phone to control the way in which the current works, so that it's a little bit at a time, but very, very precise. So that means it's sort of very powerful. So that's another possibility with deuterium. Like I can't say for certain, but the physics suggests that this is possible. And it's just back to this balance of with deuterium and light. If it emits light, if it's in the cerebral spinal fluid or the blood, then it's great, because it's just a ferry boat for light. But then if you're emitting a load of light in the mitochondria where you don't want it, or other places, it could be problematic. So it's like theoretical, but it's just there are people who are onto the idea of deuterium emitting light, because deuterium does store a massive amount of energy, because it's involved in making sort of like nuclear bombs and things like that. And then there's a lot of interest in deuterium in something called 0 point energy technology. So it's a way of not being dependent on gas and oil and electricity, a much better way of making energy. So even though deuterium in a biological organism is not a good thing, deuterium definitely isn't evil because it's got a lot of potential to be used to make cleaner, much more energy efficient fuels. But of course, because the gas and electric and the petrol and the petroleum industry and everything's all got a stranglehold on our power system, it's very difficult for people to understand that Tesla was right, that you can get energy out of the ether. And there's stuff like, I think there's enough energy in one ball lightning to power something like a whole city. So there's lots and lots of other energy sources that relate to the environment. But again, with everything to do with how society's set up, we're led to believe that, oh no, when the oil runs out, oh, that's the end. And, we must keep paying more and more for oil when there's actually other energy sources that have been suppressed. So I think deuterium's really fascinating, both biologically and in terms of sort of nature and the environment and things like that. So it's definitely one of my favorite molecules. There is another isotope of hydrogen called tritium. So that is a radioactive form of hydrogen. But I think with deuterium, I hope I've given deuterium a good introduction of why I think it's something really interesting.
Yeah, yeah, you have. And I love that you went over the good and the bad because I think that when it's like sometimes introduced to people, they talk about all the negative things and like things that have high deuterium. And one of the thoughts that crossed my mind that I wanted you to touch on. So, I have a background in helping people with addiction, right? So we know that like certain supplements are very high in deuterium, some foods are high in deuterium if you're eating them out of season, this kind of thing. But I don't ever hear anyone talking about like drugs, methamphetamines, heroin, things that people put into their body when they're in active addiction. And it majorly, I do believe it very much puts someone in a mitochondrial dysfunction, not to mention circadian disruption and all of that. But when it comes to the topic of deuterium, would you say that like those, just like some medications are high in deuterium, that these street drugs, if you will, are also going to wreak havoc on our cellular makeup?
Okay, so from a perspective of you have to think about volume and how many hydrogens there is in a molecule and did it see the sun. So something like collagen powder, first of all, it's not natural at all to make that. So you're concentrating already concentrated deuterium in a factory and drying it out. So that's going to be like 300 parts per million of deuterium. And people take quite a large dose of collagen powder. So there's nothing wrong with oxtail or beef cheek or like boiling fish or whatever in to make natural collagen because there's tons of other really interesting connective tissue. I don't think collagen, as soon as it's like full spectrum light, as soon as you start thinking, oh, I know, I'll just get some like oxtail and I'll take out all the collagen because I think that's more important. Well, you left behind a ton of other really interesting connective tissue like and elastins and all sorts. And also you took the collagen out of context and it's now not full spectrum like connective tissue anymore. So it's just the same. It's the same thing over and over and over again. Just take everything's meant to be full spectrum. Stop taking bits out of it and trying to be clever. Just have the natural thing. When it comes to medication and supplements, say Prozac, I think that's got something like 18 hydrogen. So potentially there could be some deuterium there. But I think people take something I don't know the dose off the top of my head for all antidepressants. It's like say if they took 100 milligrams, it's hardly anything. Then when it comes to supplements, that when they get made in a factory, you're not like you can fractionate deuterium and hydrogen. It's just expensive. So because it's being produced and hydrogenation or doing a reduction, like adding hydrogen, is a massively popular, like vital, pivotal chemical reaction that's happening. So you are going to be adding hydrogen, then things like seed oils and hydrogenated vegetable oils, they're going to be a massive problem because of the volume that people consume. So, and they can be like 250 parts per million of deuterium. So with the supplements, it's not just about the deuterium alone, it's also about the disgusting and horrible quantum information that you're putting into your body, because it's all back to, like anything. I'm not against supplements. I just think that people don't understand biochemistry, because I definitely don't understand the biochemistry of everything. Even though I've been into biochemistry and supplements for sort of like 25 years, there's still things I don't understand how they work. And also, all the supplements have never been programmed by light. And the other thing about making supplements is, having worked in a lab a lot, heavy metals are bloody amazing catalysts and are really, really helpful in loads of chemical reactions. So that's where the heavy metals come from. It's not people being dirty. They're just absolutely brilliant at performing lots of chemical reactions. So you're going to end up with like heavy metals as well, along with horrible information, because it's not natural. So you create chaos and confusion in the body, and or noise. Then when it comes to processed food, that's the same problem again, that like whatever we want to say masses, people might want to call it frozen light. If you're going to eat food that's got really dreadful light information in it, whether it's frozen light or charge that's gained inertia, whatever you want to call it, it's still not what the body's expecting. And then it's a very expensive process to try and deal with all of this massive amount of noise you've brought into the body, because it's not expecting like Debbie's cakes, or I'm trying to think of other things that are really bad, that's super processed.
Twinkies.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I was going to say Twinkies. I'm trying to think of like, yeah, because people in the UK might not know what those are. Like, like those unicorn cupcakes that look delicious, or
Or
like
club. I
like.
used to love club bars in England. They
Oh
were my
yeah. Oh yeah, we
favorite
have
chocolate.
clubs still,
Oh
and
my God, I used to love
penguins,
those.
and yeah, and taxi, yeah, that and digestive biscuits. But anyway,
And digestive biscuits.
that's the thing. It's not kind of natural. So now I'm going into the, like, with things like cocaine and heroin. You have to remember they came from a plant. You can make cocaine in the lab. I remember when I worked at Leeds, somebody did make a load of cocaine and amphetamine, because that's what these people do it all the time in universities, because we have like loads of access to everything, and you've got like loads of really smart, naughty young people who can't help themselves. So they got away with it because when they confiscated it all, they destroyed it. So the chemist said, "Did you check if it was D cocaine or L cocaine, or I think it was amphetamine they were making? Did you check the stereoisomer? Because if the chirality is wrong, it's useless." So they said, "Oh, we've thrown it all away now." So he just got away with everything. So the other really important thing about like the heroin and the cocaine is, it's once again back to somebody's not taken broad spectrum like opium poppy or broad spectrum cocaine leaf. Because if you look at the history of those leaves in where they come from in the Amazon, there's like a massive list this big of all the things that they can help with. So this is the leaf, be it, I've seen like vertigo, a huge amount of like healing benefits. So what's happened now is people have taken something, it's not broad spectrum coca plant anymore. You've just taken one alkaloid out, not with all the rest of its alkaloids, which I'm not saying that I agree with that. I just think there was nothing wrong with that plant left alone by itself, growing in the forest for people using it medicinally. And if tribes needed to chew the leaves because they had to hike for 4 days, then so what? They're not going to get like mega high or anything. They're just going to be energized. So that's the other problem of not just deuterium, but you're taking like something out of being full spectrum. Like we know that blue light from about 435 to 460 nanometers is horrible for biology because we took it out of all the rest of the spectrum. Then I have my reservations about overuse of red light panels, because it's 4 wavelengths out of like quadrillions of wavelengths.
Right.
So when it comes to like say amphetamine or cocaine use, in terms of the volume that people snort or inject or eat or whatever they do, it's actually not a huge amount. So I wouldn't say the deuterium would be a problem in those drugs. But also when people make things in labs or extract alkaloids from plants, be it people do DMT and all sorts, it always involves organic solvents, and you don't know how clean it is. They're not going to have bothered to do a mass spec on things to make sure it's clean. So I would say the deuterium's not the biological concern, it's the contaminants. But then also with all of these drugs, like I said, the reason they're so problematic is you've taken them away from the rest of the plant, and then you're taking them in a huge concentration that wouldn't be whatever they were designed for. Because like everything, like deuterium, like opium's not evil, nor is cocaine plants. I mean, they were used for dental anesthesia for a long time, and obviously morphine and things like that. It's all the basis of all our opiates. So it's kind of a complicated subject. But then what happens is, like with the opium, for example, people make heroin and then think, oh, I know, I'll acetylate it to make, because I think, heroin's acetyl morphine, I think. And then if you take off the acetyl group, it doesn't go over the blood-brain barrier quite as quick. So like, oh, good, we now have got a painkiller. I know, let's make more things of the same family. Let's make some codeine. Let's make other kind of single kinds of alkaloids. And of course, people get addicted to those as well, because that's the problem with those like opiate receptors, that they're very, very pleasurable. So I think it's a very interesting topic, addiction, but I definitely don't blame deuterium coming from the drug. If people are full of deuterium, it's because they're eating shit while they're using substances and not going outside, and they're sitting in blue light or going to raves, or whatever they do when they're either using or recovering with come downs or looking for more. So yes,
like
it's an interesting subject.
Yeah, it's in like another layer of toxins. And we had Susan Pierce Thompson. She's a PhD, and she was explaining processing of food and then processing of drugs, and how equally they're all addictive. And that's kind of the same thing that you're saying, is it's the process by which that these things are broken down and like separated from each other that is doing so much damage. But I've been curious for so long, like, are drugs also like heavy in deuterium, like all these other things? Can it be categorized the same? So you cleared that up, Sarah, and I appreciate that. So we have just a few minutes left here. And Laura, do you have any questions as we close?
Just a burning question. I guess it's two parts, but they come together. Can we test for deuterium in the body other than the MRI? And is there an optimal level we should have? And we know that you are a fan of deuterium depleted water. Is that one of the ways you can either do the testing, or can you use that as a tool? And how effective is it? And do you have any case studies? That's a lot, but whatever you can give us in a few minutes.
Oh, yes. So first of all, yeah, you can get deuterium tests. So in the United States, it's Lightwater Scientific, and I think they do saliva. And then for Europe, we use Gabor Chomely's company, and it's breath, but we can get some saliva. So in the UK, people use Osmio water. Then Europe, it's easier to buy from Hungary to get the test. So yeah, you can get the test all over the world. Lightwater only service the United States. They might do Canada. And Victor's been in love with deuterium for probably like 25 years. So he knows a lot about it. And then worldwide you can get deuterium tests shipped to other countries as well. It's just like anything with Australia and New Zealand, you'd still probably, I think it would still be Gabor's facility, because he's been in the deuterium depletion game and deuterium for 35 years. So he's definitely like a world expert. And he makes deuterium depleted water to fund his research, because of course you can imagine deuterium, the computer says no if somebody wants to get funding, because it's a safe, non-toxic anti-cancer pharmaceutical. So Gabor's trying to get deuterium depleted water licensed as a pharmaceutical, because that means in certain countries people would be able to have it on what we'd call in the UK prescription. Maybe people in the US and Canada call it a different word. So yes, so yeah, so you can definitely test. And that's something that I'm gathering like my funds, because one day I want to build a deuterium testing facility. So it would be in the UK, but then I do have New Zealand citizenship. So it probably would make more sense to build one in New Zealand, because in the UK, Hungary's close enough for us, regardless of European Union and Brexit issues. But yeah, so definitely the bottleneck is that there's just not many testing facilities. And then the bottleneck with making deuterium depleted water, it's a really really complicated, almost sort of like almost like quantum fractional distillation. So it's expensive. But in terms of depleting deuterium, it's not just about the water. I would say because it's so tied into leptin and it's going to have a link into timing in the body and energy, the first thing that people would do would be to fix their circadian rhythm, because if people sleep properly, their bodies are much more willing to do the proper like tasks, housekeeping tasks in the night, including depleting deuterium. And then obviously hot and like higher ultraviolet light exposure, that can help the body deplete deuterium, because there's different reasons and mechanisms, but the most obvious one, UVA makes people sweat, and just being out in the sun is hot, so you're going to sweat out deuterium, because the way it's going to be in the body, you're going to have it like predominantly as DO, like, or D2O, so it's going to be in the water. So if you sweat out like sweat, it's going to have H2O in it, and then water that's a DHO as well. Then the next thing, because when you eat food by a long process, it's going to end up as protons and electrons to go into the mitochondria. So if people eat a lot of food that's high in deuterium, then that's going to mean it's very much likely to get into the mitochondria. We do have something called the TCA cycle that happens before the electron transport chain. That's a many series of reactions that make different products. And part of this, the reason it's so big, the TCA cycle, is it's also an opportunity for checks to happen to make sure that as few deuterium as possible end up going into the mitochondria, because then they can't get into the ATPase and mess it up. Then the other thing about the TCA cycle is when you do something called like fasting, just because, or even one meal a day, just because you're not overloading your TCA cycle and your mitochondria with food, that's going to deplete deuterium as well. But then obviously overeating, like anything, you're just putting too much like food into trying to stuff it all into the mitochondria. Yes, some of it's going to via acetyl-CoA be stored as body fat, but then it's just an example of just something simple as don't eat too much would be the first step in controlling deuterium. Then of course fats are much lower in deuterium than glucose. When it comes to deuterium levels naturally, like the ocean is something like 155 parts per million, and then water at the equator is about 150. Then for human health, there's numerous studies to show that when deuterium levels in a person goes over 150 parts per million, that they often present with cancer or several comorbidities like two autoimmune diseases, pain, diabetes, obesity, all sorts of things. When it's sort of in the high 140s, people can manifest with sort of one semi-bad like autoimmune that's not full blown, maybe insulin resistance, like an amount of obesity that's like just saying having weight that bothers them, but they're not classed as having obesity, sort of technically, lack of energy, brain fog, things like that. So for good health, and also in terms of lowering it to an amount where it's much less likely to trigger this switch that can cause cancer, because again there's a big correlation between high deuterium in the person and having cancer, as we discussed right at the beginning. The deuterium is a very important switch. So different people say different things, that some people say it should be below 135 parts per million, and other people are more fussy and ambitious and say it should be below 130. So depending on the test that you get, they have like red, orange and green just for simple language, and it'll like have a arrow for you to show you where you are. So definitely anything over 145 is a problem. And then anything over 150 is bad, but that person's probably going to already tell you, oh, I've got like a lupus and I've got Hashimoto's and I'm in pain and I'm tired and I'm on metformin and stuff like that. So, you know, it's something that often correlates with kind of people's complaints. Then in terms of like the deuterium in the food, that's one of the reasons I think that ketogenic diets are really beneficial medically, because they're going to be a deuterium depleting diet. And also, when you use fat as fuel for most of the time, there's more electrons. So you're going to make more of your own deuterium depleted water at complex 4 in the mitochondria. So you can sort of wash yourself out from the inside and also not take in so much deuterium. Because like everything, like there's going to be a deuterium in and a deuterium out. So even if people start to, say, do more saunas, get more sun exposure, do things to manage like the way in which they deplete, if they're going to just keep eating processed food and loads of other high deuterium compounds, like loads of supplements and collagen and seed oils, they're just putting it all back in again. So with the water, the reason I like it is, first of all, people try much harder with things if they have to financially invest. So if somebody's sort of toying with, oh yeah, I sort of want to do a keto diet, and they've got lots of medical issues, it does make sense. Well, why don't you just do deuterium depleted water as well? And they're much less likely, or that the adherence is going to be better to the keto diet because they've spent money on the water as well. And then they're obviously very well studied and well tested with thousands and thousands and thousands of patients. This is Gabor Chomely's work and the use of deuterium depleted water in cancer. And I think from our last conversation, he said it's really important to get the deuterium depleted water as soon as possible and also to do the protocol properly. And the good thing about deuterium depleted water is because it's just water with stuff taken out, it doesn't interact with anything. So it's not going to be like taking some kind of really unusual supplement. It's just water with less deuterium in it. So it's completely compatible with anything else that people do. And of course, people, if people can afford it or are really interested in deuterium, they just do deuterium depletion protocols of their own. Or if someone lives in a high deuterium area, I think Stephanie Seneff lives in, well, she said, I know she lives in Hawaii. She just adds a little bit of deuterium depleted water to her water just to bring it down a bit because Hawaii is pretty close to the equator. So I don't, as far as I know, I've not asked her whether she does full deuterium depleting protocols, but she adds a bit just to bring the level down a bit. So hopefully that answers the deuterium
Yeah.
test and how much question. But the thing is, with the water, if somebody says, oh no, I can't afford the water, and they're still eating a standard American diet, I'm like, just do a keto diet because it's free. Like, it's not free. You just, you don't have to invest in anything extra. And then the same as if people really want something free, they can focus on circadian rhythm because that's the other problem. There is a light, like I said, the UV light is very important for the deuterium, as is also excessive blue light is going to indirectly cause the body to hold on to more deuterium just because the mitochondria make less of their own deuterium depleted water. So you're not washing it out from the inside, as I would say.
Oh,
Uh,
that was fantastic, Sarah. Wow.
reason to avoid the blue light, everybody. We've talked a lot about that.
Oh, yeah, actually, we only mean like the blue light inside, the full
Yes.
spectrum blue light from the sun. I was just doing some references earlier, and the blue light from the sun is really important for healing skin, and also it can shrink adipocytes and control things like that. So yeah, that the artificial blue light's a monster.
Yes, artificial blue light is the monster. Oh,
And one of the
goodness,
reasons
Sarah,
we're all
thank
wearing
you
blue blockers.
for,
Yes.
for being here. I know we're out of time now, and I know Laura loves to give a nice thank you. And where can people find you?
I just go by Busy Superhuman online. So I've got a Substack which I'm working on, and that's been going a bit. And there's like a league table in it, and the best I've gone, I got like 10th in Rising in Science. But it's like everything, like soccer, it's always moving. So there's long form articles there, and that's I started off as that for beginners. So I haven't gone too crazy with kind of going in depth with complicated things yet, but there's sort of information there. I've got YouTube with videos and interviews, the quantum-based podcast if people like to listen. Instagram is Busy Superhuman. That's things like carousels and some reels, sort of short form. Then TikTok, if people like going on TikTok, I've got some short form there. I think you can actually upload like 30 minutes to 1.5 hours on TikTok now. And then I do Instagram lives sometimes, like this, it's Sarah's Quick Quantum Lives, where I'll just talk about one thing for 10 or 15 minutes and people can sort of request something. Then I have my membership group because obviously like I'm not a very trusting person at all. So I won't give away very much, online. I'll answer a few questions, but if you want more sort of access to me, you have to join my group or be a client because, I'd love to help people, but I'm not going to be telling my personal stuff to like strangers and my labs, so don't bother asking. But obviously, with my own group and my own clients, I've got like a million of my own labs, and sometimes it's really good to like talk about things like that. So yeah, that's how it is. I do reply to comments on YouTube and Instagram, but don't like expect me to in 150 characters solve your life problems. I'm not being horrible, I just can't. So,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, yeah, it makes complete sense.
We can't save everybody, right? So are
Well,
we
the thing is,
skipping our question, our
actually, I was
signature
just
question?
yeah, I was just like studying because I'm really into lots of things. There's like the Hebrew, the not the tetragrammaton, but the pentagrammaton. So it's got nothing to do with witchcraft, by the way. It's just that if you pronounce it, it's like it's Yeshua, and so it's just like almost Jesus in Hebrew. There's like a extra Hebrew letter put in, and it actually what it means or represents that particular word is you are your own savior. And I was reading a book all about different sort of Hebrew letters and like meanings and things like that. So yeah, you're completely right, Laura. We can't save everybody, and you are your own savior. You have to do it yourself. And of course, I'm not dismissing religion. I think that's massively important, and I love it. But fundamentally, exactly as Laura said, we can't help everybody, and you've got to help yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We
And
actually have a signature question, Sarah, and what does quantum healthy mean to you in a short answer?
I don't know. I thought you were going to ask like all the women, what's your bra size or something. I don't know. What does quantum health mean to me? Okay, and
healthy, yeah.
quickly, I think quantum health to me means reconnecting with nature, all of it, like the plants, the magnetism, the plasma, the beaches, expand your aura and disconnect from like the complete other universe, which is social media, which I completely agree has lots of uses. It's wonderful, but it's not real life. So that later on you can learn to become coherent quantumly, but also your heart brain waves are more coherent so that then you can more likely be able to access a bliss state, which then opens up connection to the collective or God or the source or whatever you want to call it, so that you can then, as I would say, enlighten yourself.
Yeah.
So I'll just finish on that base because it ties in with, we are our own savior. And once again, I'm not for one moment disagreeing about anything to do with religion, but you still have to go outside and connect with nature. And, if you really love Jesus, that's wonderful. If you can do quantum better, you'll just be able to get better connection because you're just less distracted and not in pain and in a bad mood all the time. So, I think it's something that's what quantum health means to me. I think it's a way to give people independence, like use nature to heal you because it's free, and then use nature to become coherent so that you can connect to consciousnesses higher than your own, whatever you want to believe in, anything, and then you can find out for yourself how everything works. But that's what I think it is like summed up of what my goals are with people.
Beautiful.
Awesome.
Well, we know you have to get going, so we'll just say quick thanks for all
I've
the
only
rabbit
got
holes. All
pardon.
the rabbit. Sorry, Sarah.
Oh yeah, there's loads of like rabbit holes. They never stop. But the thing is, I'm at the phase where I keep like I'm starting to see common denominators. Like sometimes I think, oh, I'm completely insane. How can that possibly, And then all of a sudden it'll come back in a slightly different language, and I'm thinking, oh yeah, I'm kind of getting the idea now. But that's the whole fun of things. Like there's loads of stuff that we can't possibly know because we don't have the technology, and there's lots of stuff to do with the universe that's kind of much harder to connect to now with all the stupid EMFs in the way. But I just still think it's something. Keep on being curious, keep on learning. Don't think people are a guru, and find out things for yourself. And nature is a great teacher. So, that's and like the other thing, yeah, the big time, the time is an important rabbit hole, or physics of anti-aging. I don't think anti-aging is just something you buy in a supplement or some Botox or some shit like that. There's plenty of natural ways.
Fantastic. You are a quantum savage, Sarah.
I am a savage. Yes, I
You're a
am
savage with
definitely.
learning and then distilling all this scientific information that's way beyond some of our heads, but at the same time, you're also savage at applying it and then testing yourself and seeing if it's working. And anyway, so just we just want to say
And then
thanks.
I'm getting more savage in my old age with people because I'm like, look, you've just got to do it. Just do it.
Do
You
it.
know, that's the thing. It's like, as Andeea said, it's like, so what if it's woo? Go and do the woo in the garden. There's like, or the backyard, like meditate or build like a labyrinth or put all the crystals out there. You know, I think the woo is huge, you know. So yes, it's, you have to do it as well. And, you know, I'm all with both of you about things that the theory is really complicated, but the application is really simple.
Mhm.
And the more you try and analyze everything, the more confusing quantum biology is going to become. A bit like Pilates, like that's the art of making any kind of movement ridiculously complicated, where it comes to the point where I just have to say to people, just move, you
Yeah.
know, like move, just get on with it, like class. And same with people get stalling because they think like, oh, I need to do this quantum thing perfectly. It's like, no, just go outside.
Yeah,
Yeah.
But it does help, like, for example, just back to the deuterium that we've talked about for the last hour, knowing that there's high deuterium in collagen powder and maybe even protein powder and these things that we're
Oh
putting
yeah,
high
an
amounts.
amino acid. They're stupid amino acids because that's the whole thing. Like when I've worked in a lab, the last thing I ever want to do would be eat my experiments, and that's basically what goes on in a factory. It's just a giant, disgusting biochemistry lab full of solvents and chemicals. So I have no idea why people would want to. People laugh at me for eating raw animal based. It's like, well, at least it's natural. Have you ever been in a biochemistry lab? If you did, you would not eat like stuff that comes out of it. So yeah, that was always a joke we had amongst ourselves, the scientists, that, you know, which department would you like to work in if you had to eat your own experiment? So, you know,
I'm so happy you said that.
everybody wanted to work in food science, not microbiology or like the butterfly counting biologist. So yeah, it's just our own science humor.
You
So,
have
you
just
know,
helped my own nutrition practice by that one statement. Don't eat your own experiments.
yeah, don't you, yeah, like or go and pretend you want to do a biochemistry or chemistry degree and then go into a chemistry lab and I swear you'll be out again in half an hour. Or go and root around in like there used to be this giant storeroom that like if you wanted a really rare chemical, it was like you had to go down this basement and all it was just a room. It was massive, just full of like chemicals, and you had to kind of search for things with a label alphabetically, and people had mixed them all up, and it was literally like being in a room full of dementors because the chemicals, even though they were all encased in their bottles, it just sucked the life out of you. And sometimes it would take half an hour in this kind of like dungeon of looking for some really unusual chemical that somebody'd either then used it all and put the empty bottle back on the shelf. So yeah, like chemicals and stuff, it's like very, yes, no. Anyway, so yeah, don't eat your own experiments unless it's something to
Love
do
it.
with cooking. Yeah.
And
Okay.
and
Well,
don't
well,
those drugs too, like the Andeea mentioned, right? Same thing. Those are
oh yeah, yeah. Like yeah. Well, that's the thing. I think you can. The whole point is with stuff like that, if you have to like, everybody knows they shouldn't, and it's all very complicated. Because that's another thing. I'm really interested in addiction and bliss states. Because some people, if they can't access a natural bliss state like Kundalini and like wave coherence and all of that magic, because they want some kind of experience, then of course there's drugs and things offered, which and alcohol is called spirits also. So it's like a blast of light, as the Kabbalah would call it, that's too much inappropriately. Like all of these drugs, it's like a light explosion, but it's not
Mm.
like just letting the light sort of trickle out in a more sort of, finding natural highs and things. So yeah, I think there's massive amounts of how quantum biology can help people who are struggling with any kind of addiction, whether it's food or porn or class A drugs or weed or whatever. It's sort of often like there's all different theories behind it, but I think it's something, if people, quantum's not very well known really if we think about it, and I just think people who think, oh, I've tried everything, it's like, no, you haven't. Give it a
Mm.
chance.
Yes, give it a chance. Exactly. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for listening. Sarah, thank you so much for your time.
Thank
And
you for inviting me.
yes, we'll see everybody next time. Thank you for sticking around to the end of this podcast. We want to thank our sponsor, VIVARAYS, who allows for us to get this information to you. They offer top-of-the-line blue blocking glasses, which, as we know, are critical for our health these days for blocking artificial light at night. Over 90% of our time is spent indoors under artificial lights, and this puts us all prone to circadian rhythm disruption. You can use the code QUANTUMHEALTHY for a discount. Link is in the show notes.
Thank you so much for listening to the Quantum Healthy podcast. We hope you found some value in this information. And if you feel inspired, please share it and leave us a 5-star review. This will help us reach so many more people. If you want to connect with Laura, you can find her at laurakissmanwellness.com and Andeea at andeearay.com. Links are below in the show notes. Now, go find some sunlight and embrace your own quantum healthy.